So, when you start out in Guild Wars 2, your first mission is to enjoy the sweet character creation process. Now, if you look carefully, you'll notice that I'm following the current meta, but you can do as you please. After all, when it gets to endgame, you'll probably have a makeover kit to fix yourself. Then you kind of pick some random crap that doesn't matter. I think you work the streets for a little bit. I don't know, there's a bit of story. The name's a bit important because you want people to be able to whisper you, so don't put any of those accents. I hate those accents. After that, Guild Wars 2 shows you a really nice cutscene, and then you're kinda just plopped down. At this point in the game, your goal is to just follow green stars and arrows. And this should be pretty easy as long as you figured out how to move around with your WASD keys and how to turn the camera using your right click button. Oh, and yeah, you want to stare at the minimap. Speaking of which, you'll notice that every time my character turns, the map rotates a bit. This is going to get annoying really fast, so just turn that off. Now look at the map. My character's icon is pointing the way my character is facing, but there's also a flashlight which shows me which way my camera is looking. This is something that takes a while to get used to, but once you get used to it, it helps you so much in exploring and moving around the map without getting lost. The thing is, you can only follow green arrows and stars for so long because they vanish quite often, like at level 2. At this point, a lot of people can't help but feel lost, and that's fair enough. In a traditional MMO, the quest train just doesn't stop. You always have something to do. Guild Wars 2 gives you this scout as a guide, but that doesn't really feed you a plot, nor does it really motivate you. The key to approaching Guild Wars 2's story is this. Not all of the story is explicitly told. You're basically forced into forming part of the story. It's your story. The simplified plot is this. Sure, some exciting stuff just happened, but that's done and dusted. Right now, you have nothing to do, so you might as well go on an adventure and look for something to kill time while you wait for your next orders or whatever. Imagine that in real life you just ran away from home, threw away all of your money and credit cards, gave up all of your responsibilities, and just decided to be a vagabond for the hell of it. If you have an explorer's nose, you'll find excitement in the form of dynamic events, or jumping puzzles, or mini-dungeons, or dynamic events in mini-dungeons. But just like in real life, you can get unlucky and not stumble into adventure. In that case, what would you do in real life? I mean, you're a vagabond with nothing better to do. Why not keep bandits off of trade routes? Why not help out at the Chocobo Moa Ranch? These are the Renowned Hearts, which is a system pretty unique to Guild Wars 2 and ArenaNet's replacement for traditional quest givers. Instead of directly interacting with NPCs and fetching stuff for them, you just help around in an area and earn yourself a reputation. I mean, if you have nothing better to do, you might as well get your name out there, right? This method of story progression, where you're stumbling into events and helping around farms and lumber mills, is obviously a rather non-linear way of delivering our story, and a lot of it is in your hands. But once you're aware of this, you'll realize that this method of storytelling affords you a lot of freedom in how you play. And there is a story, you just have to make it. Feel free to roleplay. Now, after level 10, I like to weave map completion in between personal story steps. But you can rush the personal story, or even ignore it, it doesn't really matter. Some people think of the Renowned Hearts as side quests to help you level up, but others treat them as part of the main quest and make sure they nab each one before moving on to the next map. You choose. The most important thing to realize is that killing enemies barely gives experience, while dynamic events, hearts, and dungeons give the most experience. And hearts are the hardest part of map completion, but completing a map gives you a nice chunk of rewards. Speaking of which, you can even get some decent experience just from watching vistas and unlocking waypoints and exploring your way through a map. But I guess the most important thing to realize is that leveling isn't the be-all and end-all, unlike in pretty much every other MMO. Experience comes easy and is on a linear scale, so don't worry about it. Seriously, take the time to just explore the world. Exploring is the game, not hitting level 80. Laugh at the Quaggons, look at the art, listen to the soundtrack. The Guild Wars 2 soundtrack goes so well with the art style. It's the first MMO I've played where I haven't had to listen to my own music while playing. Stick around after a dynamic event to see the next step in the event chain. In my thousands of hours of playing, I don't think I've even seen half of the dynamic events in the game. Look for secret caves, check behind bushes, climb walls. While the renowned hearts give you a sense of how the region is in the long term and the dynamic events show you the day-to-day happenings, there's other content that builds up the environment. Nothing is more satisfying than when you walk into a suspicious cave and find a complex network of underground tunnels with a jumping puzzle or an Easter egg. Usually there's a chest or an achievement or a rich gathering node there to incentivize you. These little nooks and crannies contribute so much to the world building that ArenaNet gets oh so right. I mean, there's this event in Matrika province where the NPCs talk about how they, opened a wormhole to an unknown place and they don't really want to look into it. But like, you can actually find the end of that wormhole on the other side of the continent. Next time you see some nicely placed rocks next to each other or a hole in the ground, you should be thinking, the devs want me to follow this, don't they? If you slow yourself down and take a casual approach to the game, you'll catch these details and you won't run out of things to do. In fact, the personal story will have trouble catching up to your level. Going back to the personal story, you might start off finding it kind of slow or cheesy. This has to do with ArenaNet's philosophy on scale. The overarching story is that you, a random person, starts out by helping around their home and earns a reputation. This gets you pushed into more important missions until eventually you stumble into a really big deal. However, you manage to thrive and save the day and become a hero, and from there the story just escalates. It's expected of an MMO to start you off with hitting slimes or maybe rats with a stick, and end the game with you shooting fireballs at dragons. Guild Wars 2 does the same, but instead of it being all about killing things with stronger weapons, you have more interesting feats, because the game isn't just about killing things. You'll be drinking pirates under the table while sneaking out a hostage one day, but you'll be raiding the temple of a fallen god the next. I promise you, the personal story eventually picks up pace, has a sense of danger and urgency, and definitely feels more heroic, especially in the later expansions. On that topic, if you don't enjoy the base game storytelling, give the later expansions a go. ArenaNet's storytelling has been improving over the last 5 years, and the newer stories are delivered much better than the base game story. Also, don't feel like you have to complete the story, or that you even have to complete maps. A lot of people set these as their goals, because the game encourages you to set your own goals, but then they go too hard at it and burn out. You can be the lazier adventurer who doesn't help every farmer he sees. You can be the adventurer who doesn't care about the big bad dragon and just let someone else deal with it. This game allows you to play at whatever pace you like. In the end, you can always go back and play through at a later date. Storytelling wise, I guess the later story steps, like the ones in the expansions, will pretty much assume that you've done the base game story. So if you skip ahead, I guess you'll have to pretend that you have amnesia or something, or check the wiki to figure out what's going on. But I guess, that said, the game will try to fill you in on details along the way, especially when they're pretty important details. Now, I think I should quickly mention a few other things you should know about before I end this video. Depending on whether you're a free-to-play player, you might start dabbling in PvP and World v World around now. These are definitely game modes in their own right, but I'll stick to talking about them at a later date. Inventory space is going to become an issue, so you want to visit a bank. You can find a bank in the PvP lobby, World v World lobby, guild hall, any big city, or even crafting stations count. Make sure you check out the materials storage tab, because this baby can hold a lot of your useful crafting materials. You can send items there just by clicking deposit all materials from your inventory, and you should get into a habit of doing this quite often just to keep your inventory free. If your inventory is still full, you'll need to visit a vendor. And the first thing I like to do is click sell junk, and then go through and sell other stuff that I think is junk, but the game doesn't. Then you want to buy a salvage kit, and salvage all the gear you're not going to be using, to get more crafting materials. Of course, you want to deposit these crafting materials again. If you're still having inventory issues, you can sell your stuff on the trading post, and you should check the trading post for bags. While we're at the trading post, we should talk about gear. While stats aren't extremely important in Guild Wars 2, you should still be using gear that's appropriate for your level. The trading post makes it easy to get gear because the filtering system lets you just put in a level range, your class, and maybe a few keywords to make sure you're getting the right stats. And for most of your levels, the gear will actually be really cheap. If for some reason you're having trouble getting gold, you can either cut down trees or mine nodes, or the easiest way for beginners to get gold is to do daily achievements. There's about 12 achievements you can choose from per day, and if you do just 3 of them, you'll get 2 gold for that day. If you want to do some hardcore role playing and play on challenge mode, you can craft your own gear. But just like in any other game, you'll have to craft about 20 crappy daggers to be able to make a good one, and then 20 good daggers to make an even better one, etc, etc. If you're wanting to play with a party or are interested in dungeons, you should check out the LFG tool like I'm showing right now. Just make sure if you're starting a dungeon group, label it accurately with something like beginner dungeon group or whatever. I guess now I'll show you some settings just to make your life a bit easier. The 2 most important ones I can think of are AoE loot on interact and show all usable object names. What the second one will do is whenever you need to interact with an object, like I don't know, pick up some chicken feed for a heart, there will actually be a yellow name popping up on your screen which will help you find these items. I like to keep the profanity filter off, content guide, whatever. I like to have a clock showing on my minimap. And I guess these are my camera settings. Follow them if you want, but it's definitely worth playing around with it. Next, there's the controls. I guess you should really know how you're targeting enemies. For me, I use tab to target the nearest enemy, and while I'm playing, I'm probably spamming the tab key all day. Something that came into the game quite recently for all your returning players is the action camera mode. I have a toggle key so that I can toggle between it, and you can tell I'm in action camera mode by that little dot in the center. Action camera mode is basically like you're holding down the right click button, and it just saves your right click finger. Oh yeah, and you really want to get rid of double tap to evade, because if you're doing a jumping puzzle and you're edging towards the end of a platform to line up that jump, dodging won't help and will really ruin your day. If you're interested in jumping puzzles, you should definitely experiment with jumping while holding your movement keys, or letting go of them, or using them to turn around mid-air or whatnot. I'll give some examples in the background, but yeah, I think I'll just end the video right here. In the next video, I think I'll go over combat and why Guild Wars 2's combat system feels very clunky when you start out, but after you get used to it, I think I can confidently say it's the best combat system I've ever seen in an MMO. Thanks for watching and see you next time.
Hmm.